I saw this recent segment on Secular Talk that I thought was worth spotlighting because, again, it really seems like his tone against progressives in Congress, especially the squad members, has really taken a sharp turn to the aggressive. And I thought it was interesting, especially seeing him kind of at the end of his rope
Omar went on
with Ilhan Omar, who recently went on Mehdi Hasan's show on Peacock and gave a pretty lackluster answer. We'll watch Kyle talking about it. Unfortunately, I don't want to play the clip itself because I don't want to get demonetized. MSNBC tends to do that. But I just wanted to get your guys' reaction to this mainly because, again, I thought it was interesting, his tone, and also just the substance of this clip as well.
Ilhan Omar went on Mehdi Hasan's new show, and got to be honest with you guys, man, this clip really made me sad. It really made me sad because the biggest issue I've had with progressives in Congress is that they're like a chicken with their head cut off. They have no idea what they're doing. They have zero strategy, zero plan, zero spine, and it manifests in very pathetic ways. Like they look like children. They don't know what they're doing. They have no idea what they're doing. And listen, that critique that I'm making is fundamentally different and distinct from people who argue they're all corrupt. No, that's actually not the case. There's plenty of progressive Congress people who don't take any corporate PAC money, who don't take any big money. They really only raise through small dollar donations. They're by definition not corrupt.
And I do agree with that, although just to interject, I would say there's a case to be made that the people do become ideologically corrupt when they get into office, when they get into Washington and surround themselves with other elites, other people in the income bracket of that ilk. I certainly think that corruption can occur at an ideological level, whether or not it's subconscious is a different story. But,
yeah, I consider it more of like a shrinking of the scope of what's possible. Like your scope of reality or, your progressive politics are limited or constrained.
Right.
Yeah, right. I think it's just a complacency that they grow. Yeah, it's a complacency.
But he is true that technically, they're not taking like campaign contributions from Big Pharma, for example. So in the very literal sense, no, they are not.
It just shows how deep this fucking system of keeping the will of the people out of fucking Washington is entrenched, right? Like this is how many layers it is. Even if you take out all the fucking financial corruption, you still have to deal with.
Well, it's because they're still in a system which is corrupt, which gets to a whole another criticism, which is that is even participating in a corrupt system, is that in and of itself corrupt if you're going to participate and play by their rules and not impose your own rules and cause a ruckus, essentially. If you're going to legitimize the system by participating in it, is that in and of itself a form of corruption? So that's something to think about, but let's finish this.
So then what's their issue? Their issue is they don't know what the fuck they're doing and they're incredibly weak. That's the issue. So my critique is fundamentally different from a critique that many others make, and I just want to be clear about that. But having said that, I literally cannot say enough about how pathetic and weak and sad they are, and how easy it is to get them to be fractured and factionalized and useless. Leadership plays them like a fiddle on a regular basis. So here's Ilhan Omar.
And again, I'll just put this out here too. I get that there are certain people out there that might talk about the squad too much, right? They talk about the squad, at the expense of other things, and they almost act like they're the only issue, and that the Republicans don't even exist, for example, and that the end all and be all problem is AOC. And I do think that's kind of unproductive, and I do think that's kind of I don't know what the word is, but to deny what Kyle is saying,
it's a little bit of a straw man. It's reductionist.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a straw man, and people clearly have made a bit of an industry out of that. Clearly the whole dynamic of play. But to deny what Kyle is saying here, I think, is madness. To deny that they are without strategy, that they are operating kind of at the whim of leadership. I just think that's fact, and I think that at this point he's just being objective about the situation and about the standing of progressives in Congress. They haven't won. They haven't moved the needle. They've, lost the committee assignments that they wanted. They have nothing to show for their presence in Congress other than essentially giving cover for Biden and Pelosi when they do anti-progressive things like exclude $15 minimum wage. After they did that, Bernie and AOC and all of those people went out there and talked about how it was the best piece of legislation that's ever been passed by the U.S. Senate since
Paul called it like a huge win or something like that. Yeah, and I think that this is honestly coming from Kyle. He's just drawing these conclusions naturally based off of what's been evidenced. Like it's been mentioned, I saw in the feed. Obviously, he, along with Cenk Uygur, founded Justice Democrats, an organization that they've both parted ways with, but was largely responsible for amplifying the profile of people like AOC, like Cori Bush, like others. He was a very strong proponent of getting progressives who are corporate free in Congress so that they would be able to perform without the restrictions that Capitol imposed on them. What we've learned and what Kyle's learned is that, along with the rest of us, because he didn't know this, we didn't know this, is that the constraints, like we just mentioned, are so much deeper, right? Because the system itself is predicated on the constraints of Capitol, right? The entire system is built around that. So just getting a few people through isn't enough to solve it. And even if it were, it wouldn't work without massive organizing and solidarity and coalition building inside the halls of Congress, which he's pointing out just clearly didn't happen.
Yeah, and I think also it's a lack of an understanding of how to use power by the left. I think that we made a fundamental mistake going into this because I was a day one Justice Democrat, literally the day that Cenk announced it and Kyle announced it on their show. I signed up, I donated, I was fully behind the movement since day one. And I believed all the things that they said back then, and I believed in it in the same way. And it's why when the Force the Vote movement failed, I felt so demoralized by that because it felt like a betrayal by the people that I had put so much faith in, and that we got behind this idea that it was money in politics. Money in politics was the problem. These politicians are corrupted. They're bought and paid for by these large donations. Politicians listen to the people who pay them. So if we want the politicians to listen to us, we need to make sure that we're the ones who pay them. And we did that, and we went and we enacted that, and it didn't work. And I think that it's finally catching up with folks like Kyle Kulinski.
Yep. That was.
And by the way, check out the actual clip itself on Secular Talk, so you can see the interview with Ilhan on Mehdi's show. It's worth watching.
Terrible answer. So let me break it down for you. First, she starts by saying, well, listen, the American Rescue Plan is the most progressive policy in decades. You are supposed to be the left flank of Congress. You're not supposed to just cheerlead the plan that originally was supposed to have $2,000 checks. They reduced it to $1,400 checks. And the other big promise was the $15 minimum wage, and that was taken out. So for you to do the cheerleading for this watered-down plan means the left flank is okay with the watered-down plan. No. The whole reason you're there is to be the hardliner and to say, no, this didn't have the $2,000 checks. This didn't have the $15 minimum wage. That's unacceptable. And by the way, another phenomenal critique of the American Rescue Plan is that it's a one shot of adrenaline. There's nothing that's recurring in there. Nothing. So it doesn't last. Things that last are stuff like Social Security, Medicare. Those are the real accomplishments. An infrastructure deal that builds roads which last generations. That lasts. This is a one shot of adrenaline. And her response is, when asked about why haven't you been more critical and why haven't you fought for your priorities, she says, it's the most progressive policy in decades. Hate that part. Then she goes on to...
And I think this is all just the way the squad is responding to Biden's presidency and his actions so far.
Yeah, we're still pushing him left.
I just think it's so indicative of the fact that, again, the squad members, they really thrived under Donald Trump because it's not against their party's grain to call out and be viciously critical of Donald Trump. And again, obviously they were hoping that Bernie would get into office and lead the progressive movement as the executive. However, now they've just found themselves in such an uncomfortable position because they're up against Joe Biden, who they nominally disagree with, but to kind of continue the trajectory of career climbing, they can't really be vocal in their opposition to or the opposition of the Democratic Party direction because, again, they kind of need to rub the right shoulders and make the right friends, at least in their minds, to rise the ranks. So it really is kind of indicative of just the uncomfortable nature of being progressive in Congress during a neoliberal administration. Because in my opinion, it's like, if you're going to be a progressive in Congress right now, you have to be calling out the failings of this administration. You have to be shining a spotlight on the corruption and on the shortcomings. And that's not to say you can't give credit when, good things do happen. But like Kyle says, you're really not much of a left flank if you're just standing there and cheerleading what Biden is doing, even if it is, marginally better than what Obama did or what fill in the blank Republican would do. That's not really the role of the activist left flank. And that's why the squad members have seemingly decided to, instead of taking on that uncomfortable position, to just kind of start gradually taking the mask off, right? They're no longer really activists. They're now Democratic Party members themselves.
I think that's something that we can all learn from Kshama Savant a little bit about, right? Where she's actually spoken to the discomfort that she's experienced personally in working just in the city council in Seattle. And I think that, she can provide a lot of insight into how you can effectively maneuver that way. I mean, she's working with a bunch of Democrats, right? And they all hate her fucking guts. And they've done everything to work with corporations like Amazon to make sure that she doesn't stick around. And what you just have to quite understand is that the people that you are working with are not your community. The people that you're working with are standing in the way of what your community needs, the reform that is going to desperately help the people that you have committed to representing. And I think it's that change of mindset, right? And I don't think that it's necessary to have a third party to change your mindset, but I think this is one of those things that definitely helps about having a third party, whereas you don't consider yourself the same as Nancy Pelosi, right?
Or at least independent,
Yeah, exactly. We were just talking about it the other day, right? Where when AOC, remembering how AOC had just said it had been like asinine or insane or whatever the fuck the quote was, that she was in the same party as Joe Biden. We all remember that from way early on in the primaries, and now here we are.
Like
She's not doing that much to fuck. It was less than 2 years ago. Yeah. And now it's like.
In political speak, that's like a decade ago. You can have a complete ideological 180 in 2 years, and it's
Kirsten Sinema from Green Party.
Yeah, exactly. But what I'm saying is she's, she was one of the primary people in the whole squad was doing this, saying we have to get Joe Biden elected so that we can push him left. There's been absolutely no pushing him left. There's just been cheerleading his watered down horseshit accomplishments, right? And I think
we can't even push AOC left, much less to push Joe Biden left. Like, we're just struggling to just push AOC left. Like, she's over here, and Ilhan Omar and these folks, like, we can't even get them to move left, much less to be able to get them to move Biden left. Like, that's not even, it doesn't even seem like it's in the conversation anymore. And to what Gavin said about, these folks being put in an uncomfortable position, I'm sorry, but that's what you were put there for. Like, that's what we put you there for. We all put ourselves in, a lot of people that got behind these movements, they put themselves into uncomfortable positions, having to speak out, having to go, and publicly support these movements. It's just, and not just that, but think about the discomfort that people are feeling. What's uncomfortable is having, tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt, even though Joe Biden could have erased it with the wave of a pen. Months ago. What's uncomfortable is losing your job in the middle of a pandemic, is losing your health insurance in the middle of a pandemic. Is making $7.25 an hour. In this what we call a civilized society, like a hungry child, a person struggling with the bankruptcy of medical debt. Like those are that's the discomfort that these people need to be feeling and understanding, and have that be what drives them, not their own personal discomfort. Because let's be real, these people, they make $174,000 a year. They have the best healthcare. They're all vaccinated already. They just don't have the same kind of worries that we have as working class people, as just struggling, journalists trying to, do independent media, like much less, the person working at McDonald's or, one of these, or Amazon, pissing and shitting in bags and stuff. Like, so for these politicians, they need to be made to feel uncomfortable.
I bet shitting in a bag is pretty uncomfortable.
Exactly. I'd say that's pretty uncomfortable, and so like.